You could all turn on your, wow. Turn on your microphones. Okay, approval of agenda for August 1st, 2023.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda for August 1st, 2023.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda for today. All in favor?
Aye.
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 The agenda has been approved. And approval of the minutes from the July 5th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at those?
Chance to look at it.
And if there are any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chair, I move to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, it has been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the July 5th Planning Commission meeting. All in favor? Gardner?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes from July 5th have been approved. Item number 5, we do not have any unfinished business. Under new business, proposed regulation changes, and I will turn it over to you, Dan.
Hello, everyone. All right, so this is probably going to be the beginning of many of these. What is it? The Fremont County zoning resolution has been needing some updating for a while. We've been listening to a lot of the folks that come into the office about different struggles they're having based off of our regulations. Some of the uses are not current with what's occurring today, and it's been kind of unnecessarily cumbersome. And so it's been identified that the regulations need some updating. So with that, let's see. Planning and zoning has recognized the need for review and update to the regulations. This rewrite and consolidation is to address agricultural zone districts. The proposal in front of you is for consolidation of 2 districts into a new zone district. Changes will include reformatting, renaming, a new zone description, the development requirements of the smaller zone district, and consolidating the uses from the 2 zone districts and adding new uses into the regulations. So in conjunction with the department working on this, which I've been working on this since October, we also have the gentleman from Plan Tools that are doing the affordable housing and the attainable housing study. So we've been coordinating with Plan Tools, who's conducting an audit of the Fremont County zoning regulations to find barriers to affordable and obtainable housing. Minor modifications to these regulations may be presented in the future for consideration depending on what their findings are and what barriers they identify. But we're working together, but we're also with the need that we feel the citizens have, we didn't feel it would be appropriate to wait to try and do this rewrite and consolidation until they were wrapped up. So we're trying to work and get everything moving in the same direction at once. We are working on a timeline for completion, but we're anticipating having a finalization date around April of 2024, which is when Plan Tools, their grant ends. So we're hoping to wrap up this rewrite and have one unified new zoning resolution about by April. So the draft regulations that are in front of you have been reviewed by the county attorney. And with that, I will dive right into the first zone consolidation and rewrite. So the intent of the rewrite and consolidation is to address many of the issues and deficiencies in the current regulations, such as, but not limited to, Citizens having confusion about the zone districts they reside in. We currently have 6 zone districts that start with the word agriculture. Most of them have very minimal differences, which is why we're pushing forward with trying to consolidate some of them into each other. Zone districts, the name is causing difficulty with individuals getting financing, as banks do not like offering loans to agricultural operations. The uses needed updating. Current regulations propose barriers for housing. The consolidation will offer the citizens of Fremont County the opportunity to have more opportunities on their own land. And the current regulations had descriptions of uses in the allowed use table. The description of these uses have been moved to general requirements sections or the definition section, and that will be presented next month. So, as a housekeeping kind of deal, we had descriptions of a use in the types of uses that were allowed, and some of the stuff was just in the wrong place. So we're just trying to kind of clean stuff up, give it a new look, and add some additional things. So, as such, if you notice strike-throughs in the documents that are in front of you, that's stuff that we have removed. Red will detail uses being consolidated, and yellow will detail a new use. So at the very beginning, let's see here. This is the format that we believe we're going to wind up going with as the new format for the Fremont County zoning resolution. We have what we've done is we're going to label the zone districts residential 1, 2, and 3. 1 will be for the smallest 2 zone districts that we currently have that are going to be consolidated. Zone 2 will be for the middle 2 zone districts that we're hoping to consolidate. And then Zone 3 will be for the final 2 largest zone districts we have. We did a small, we did a rewrite and new description of the zone districts. We have what we feel is a pretty clear and easy to read table showing lot size, setbacks, minimum widths, all of the requirements of the lot. And what we've done is, on these various zone districts, the smaller lot that is absorbing the next one up, we've gone with their setbacks and their lot requirements to make sure that we're not making anything non-conforming. And what it does on some of the larger lots is it actually allows people to have an additional maybe subdivision if they want, or it allows people to expand their uses on some of these districts. So it's giving folks more options on what they own. It does have the ability to increase density if people choose to. Because when we jump into the next one, that one's a 4.5 acre lot and a 9 acre lot. So since the 9 acres being absorbed down to the 4.5, the new lot minimum will be 4.5. So anyone in that former ag living zone district can technically do a 2-lot subdivision on their land where right now they can't. So this is what we're proposing as the new format, and this would be the new R1, which is absorbing the agricultural suburban and agricultural estates zone districts. Here you can see we renamed it to try and assist the folks in the county for financing and getting that agricultural word right out of the heading, right? As you can see right in the description underneath it, it discusses agriculture. We're not taking away agriculture from anyone. We're just taking it out of that top part. Right there, we did a little bit of rewording on the description, and those 3, the dwelling manufactured home, the community building, and the golf course are the only differences between ag suburban and ag estates. This is a super easy one. Lot requirements, setbacks, coverage, everything was the same besides these 3 uses. So we gave it a new name, new description, and just brought down 2 uses, and we currently there's a moratorium in Fremont County for everywhere in our regulations where it addresses a single wide. Moving forward, we're gonna address dwellings as dwellings. So dwelling, under the header name of dwelling, we are going to have all the different types of dwellings instead of previously we would have all the individual ones spelled out, and it was creating conflict. So in order to clean that up, where all the different types of dwellings will be defined under the term dwelling, and we're just addressing it as that. So for the R1 zone district, these are the only changes that will be occurring. So do you guys want me just to present all 3 districts, or do you guys want me to stop and ask for feedback along the way so we don't get too deep into it?
Let's stop and ask in between each one.
Perfect, okay. Does anyone have any questions?
Go ahead.
Define group home.
Group home,
I mean, could that be a homeless shelter in a small lot, in a residential area?
so, give me 2 seconds here. I do not, I believe, have all of my definitions in front of me.
Yeah, there's nothing there as to what it actually,
Yep, so that would be, just give me 2 seconds. Is that part of the R1 district?
yes,
Or
it's all 3 of them.
So,
But the R1 might be the one I'm most concerned about,
okay,
with the small lot size and the higher density.
okay, so I see there, 4626, the group home. So that's not something that we've changed from either one of the zone districts. That's something that's
It's already in there.
it's currently there, and that is, that's not something we've addressed. Next month, when I bring up the definitions, hopefully I'm presenting definitions next month. That's when I would be able to define that to you, but that's not something that we've changed right now from either one of those.
Yeah, I've got a kind of a question and a comment, but my question is on process. So what you're or what we should do today is approve this on first reading? Is that what's the process here?
That is a fantastic question, and thank you for that. So as through talks with the county attorney, what we are looking to do is to hopefully get all of these approved and have a final adoption date that is later on down the road. So that way it gives me time, you guys time, and the county commissioners time to be able to present all of the new sections and all of the changes, and have one formal adoption date where they all come into effect. So I think for right now, we're hoping to use that April 2024 adoption date for this, as that seems like that's what the timeline's gonna be. But yeah, we would be approving this, or you guys would be making a recommendation on this with a adoption date of, say, April 2024.
So that would be, that's actually the ask today.
Yes.
Is that we approve the adoption of these regs with an adoption date as a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners.
That would be the ask, yes. And I apologize, this is pretty aggressive, and it's my first time presenting this, so I'm hoping to be presenting this as well as I can. But yeah, so the ask would be for approval, or recommendation to adopt this. Providing you guys recommend approval, it will then be posted, it'll go to county commissioners to schedule a public hearing. Once we schedule a public hearing, do all the publications, they'll go in front of the county commissioners, and as large of an undertaking as this is, my talks with council, we're thinking about doing 2 rounds of public hearing to get it in front of people, get it advertised out, get as much feedback as we can. So we're gonna try and see how much input we can get from the public with all of this.
Okay, and so my comment is, at the head of each table, you've got the lot areas, minimum lot areas and stuff.
Yes, sir.
And I would recommend, I don't know if it's possible to do, but when Canyon City revamped their zoning and development regs, we included a lot of figures, example type drawings.
Okay.
And so on the minimum lot, widths and things like that, it might be really good to have a figure there that shows exactly what you're talking about. And you might even think about including some odd-sized lots or something so that people have an idea of exactly how that might draw out on the ground.
Okay.
I don't know how hard that is. We had a consultant to do it for the city, so it was
Yeah,
easy for us.
I would love a consultant, but they're somewhat spendy. So we've been working on this in-house to see what we can do to kind of get things going in a better direction. We're trying to get this as close to fantastic as we can while still juggling in-house constraints and
Sure.
and everything else. But this has been worked on for the last few directors, and it just seems that it's never gotten to the point to where it can be presented, and it's been sitting around too long. The idea of it, the need for it, it's time.
One way you might consider is the GIS authority can probably do lots of drawings, use some lot lines on some actual pieces of property to show how these setbacks work and things like that. So
Okay.
might be one way to get it done.
That may be a fantastic idea, so that's something we could start trying to look into to see if we can provide a supplement or something along with each one of these to show.
We found that in the city that pictures worth 1,000 words, and the little drawings and stuff made it easier for people to understand what was going on.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. All right, so does anyone have any questions regarding the R1, or would you
Well, I
want to?
got a question.
Yes, sir.
Just to make this, in the spirit of what we're doing now, is we're taking agricultural zoning
Yes, sir.
and lifting some agricultural definitions and making that more stuff able to go in and be used on agricultural type property.
So what is occurring is you're going to find as we go on a little bit deeper where there's actually new uses put into it.
It's basically the expanding of what was restricted on agriculture. We're going to let other things in now.
Well, yes and no. So on our next consolidation, on some of the more intense uses that were allowed in the larger zone district that we're trying to consolidate down, we have a acreage minimum. So just because you're in necessarily that R2 zone district, unless you meet the requirements where you could do that formally.
But the land we're considering, is it basically still going to remain agricultural?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay.
Yes, we're not taking the agricultural use away from anything.
So this could be from anybody that wants to own a horse to raising 20 horses?
We are not prohibiting any of that. Yes.
Okay, that's what I was...
Yep. Yeah, so all we're doing is really taking away the name and the title there. So we're not giving the banks and the lenders sticker shock when they try to get financing for this. That's been a common complaint that we're getting in, that people are having difficulties based off of our verbiage. But yeah, so we're not, we're going to be able to increase residential density throughout this by having some of the lots being able to go smaller. But the uses are staying pretty compatible depending on what acreage they are. So we've tried to think of that, because we don't want a more intense use to somehow get down into that smaller lot. But maintaining the 6 zone districts, it kind of didn't make sense with such little variations throughout, and we're trying to simplify and make it easier for folks. That's our goal.
So it can go from everybody that wants a horse for the kids to somebody that wants to raise several head of cattle, or...
If they could do it before, they could do it now.
Okay.
This won't prohibit that.
The only other question I had was, once it said the minimum size is 15,000 square feet.
Yep, that's the current regulation.
That's the lease that's used for a per head livestock.
Yeah.
So if you buy a $15,000 or 15,000 square foot section, that's just enough for one cow or for one
Yes.
horse.
Yes,
No-
sir.
No building?
No, you could still have your structure on there. Your lot would still be 15,000 square foot. So that doesn't prohibit you from putting your barn and putting your house or
Okay.
whatever. You could still have that one animal unit on that
I
parcel.
didn't know if the coverage was limited to, here's your house and you've got X amount of acreage or square feet left over for that amount of critter.
That's not how we view it, no. We wouldn't put those sort of constraints on folks. We know how Fremont County has a heavy emphasis on agriculture.
Right.
and we don't want to change that.
Is restricting a lot like that to one animal feasible? Are people gonna do that?
A lot
So
of
they
folks,
got
a
one,
lot
they
of
got
folks
more.
do. And depending on what the animal unit is, it's kind of a confusing chart, and we're hoping to work on that as we move forward. But, you know, so many chickens are worth so many goats, are worth so many llamas versus one cow. So it's kind of a weird
Formula.
formula, if you will. But many folks do have, you know, their animals on the smaller lots as well as the larger ones.
I'm just amusing myself here, thinking about asking you to approve that theorem, you know.
It's an interesting chart. But yeah, so that would be the R1 zone district. A new name, slightly new description, and just 3 different changes. So if you guys are good with that one, I could switch up to the R2, which has a little bit more going on, and it might be able to help explain to Rudel, you know, how the uses are a more intense use could technically be in a zone district that could go smaller, but we have it limited by an acreage restriction, and I'll be able to show that in the very next regulation.
Dan, I have one question on this one.
Yes, sir.
So in this R1, currently, people may have 4.5 acres, and they could subdivide down to 15,000 square foot lots. Are you anticipating a lot of people doing this? And
So all of the acreage in the R1 zone district, so the current ag estates and the current ag suburban, which is what R1 is the
Yes.
consolidation of, this is the current requirements of those 2 different zone districts. This really doesn't change anything in these 2 smaller zones. This is the current regulations for each of them. So this one is the most minimal of changes of all of the proposed
Okay.
that I'm going to be speaking about today. So yeah, so this is current. So this doesn't change a thing of what people can do right now.
okay, perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Well, one other thing before we leave this, just your comment brought something to mind, and that is because we've got the county, and we've got county boundary, we've got city boundaries, we also have the water district boundary.
Mhm.
Okay, and because some of the county is covered by the water district boundary, is it worthwhile having any language in here that other regulations may apply if you're within a water district boundary?
And we could absolutely do that. People at the time of development are kind of, when they go through their development process, that's when they're running into these various other agencies and finding out whether or not they could do something or not. We can absolutely put a little caveat statement in there that, you know, other agencies, you know, make sure to do your homework, and other agencies have restrictions.
Great,
That would be a very easy thing to add as well.
okay, great.
On the water thing, is there any restriction on treated water for feeding livestock?
No, not in my world, not in planning and zoning.
Well, some places there is, but we don't hear.
Yep.
No. Goes through your meter, you can use it for darn near anything.
Anything you know?
Darn near. Then I got a question, a more
Yes, sir.
broad question. Sorry I'm late, everybody, if you've already covered this. But with the city having the same kind of labels, R1, R2, R3, do those marry up pretty well with setbacks, that sort of thing? Just the concern being if you're saying it is it R1 city or R1 county, and they're different, really easy to be, a lot of confusion there.
That absolutely makes sense. We do get folks that are somewhat confused that will come into the office when they're within city limits and try and ask us questions. And as much as we don't like directing them to the out of office, we have to tell them to go to the appropriate agency. I don't anticipate a lot of people mistaking which is their permitting authority. But I would not think that our requirements line up with the city at all.
Yeah, fair enough.
I would not think that at all, but
Is there any way to use, I mean, is R1 just a naming convention that's generally used in planning and zoning, so that's why you chose R1? Or could it be different
Yeah.
than the city, I guess, would be a point? Could it be just like C1, C2, you know?
it
Again,
could
sorry, basic questions, but.
It could almost be anything, right?
Yeah,
It could
right.
be what we want. To us, this seemed the simplest, the easiest for folks to understand. It says what it is right in the name.
Right, residential.
So we could certainly change that if that's a concern by any means. But I didn't factor in what the city had their zones named. So I see how that could cause confusion though.
Yeah, just.
Could you tag it like R1 rural or something like that, or R1R,
Yeah,
just to differentiate it?
yeah, we can,
Tonight,
I can look
yes.
into that. Yeah.
Okay, if that's all the questions on R1, you want to move to R2?
All right, sorry, just jotting down notes, guys.
No, no problem.
All right. So R2 is a consolidation of what is now agricultural rural and agricultural living. Now, agricultural rural had a 4.5 acre minimum, and agricultural living has a 9 acre minimum. Those are the two that are most similar. When you look at the table for residential 2, and let me just get going here real quick. All right, so all of that first box, all of the lot requirements are that of ag rural. That way we're not making anything non-conforming. Then as you start looking down the table there, in the minimum acre section, you'll see cemetery, contractor's yard, golf course as just a few examples on the very first page. Those are uses that are currently allowed in the agricultural living zone district, which is at 9 acres. So to try and figure out how we can consolidate without making things too intense and really changing the character of potentially neighborhoods or lots, we've factored in a minimum acreage so the more intense stuff that was up in that agricultural living zone district, what made the most sense to us is we just put an acreage restriction in order to have that be an allowed use. So it kind of keeps the same things where they were originally allowed without making the regulations overly complicated. So that was what we thought would be the simplest and easiest for folks to understand. Again, about halfway down that page where you see dwelling unit, if you go over to that conditions, that's where I was talking to you guys about where we detail out the different types of dwellings. So rather than listing out all the various different types of dwellings and everything that we currently do, we just refer to it as a dwelling, and all of the structures that fall under dwelling are now under that description. So on this one, again, with the acreage restrictions, we're keeping the same types of uses and the same size lots as they are currently allowed. On this one, we added one of the new uses that we've had a lot of people talking to us about is what we define as like an agritainment, which is some sort of agricultural entertainment. I mean, this could be anything from a pumpkin patch, a petting zoo, various kind of uses of that nature that have popped up in recent years. And our regulations don't currently allow for any of that. Now, we know some folks are doing it. We've been telling them, just be patient with us. We're trying to figure out this use and where it works. So we've added, later on when you guys get presented the definitions, there'll be a definition for agritainment. We added that. Our current regulations don't have accessory dwelling units listed in them, home occupations. We're trying to kind of clean things up so you don't have to hunt and peck around our regulations as much as you currently do to have the information in front of you. So let me see if I can. get this here. So some of the uses that were consolidated down between the ag rural and the ag living, you can see there the ADU, the elementary school. As I was kind of explaining to you guys before, the example up on the screen there, the contractor's yard, you could see where the explanation of a contractor's yard is explained in the allowed uses table. That's not where it's supposed to be. So that's all struck through, and then the definition of that is added into the sections that you're going to be presented next month. So we're trying to make it kind of a cleaner, more streamlined product and easier to read and kind of flow. Let's see here. We moved one of the conditional uses down into the SRUs. And you can see we're just, the yellow itself is a new use. The yellow and red is a newer use based off of consolidation. So we've kind of updated, cleaned up, and we think with the minimum acreage requirements on the more intense uses, that is a good way to keep things compatible as they are now. And I would be open to any questions.
So I've got a comment. I'm looking on page, I think it's section 4, page 4. It's 4.3.5.5 and following.
4.3.5.5.
It says minimum setback requirements.
Okay.
And it basically the paragraph numbers have been struck, but not the last paragraph number. See that? So it's 4.3.5.5.1.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that's a formatting issue, right?
Yep.
Okay. And also the 4.3.5.5.3, the rear yard 50 in feet. That you probably should do a global search on that to make sure whenever you're calling out dimensions, that you use that same format there.
Yep.
Because up above it's got just a 50 without any units on it.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, so this has been a bit of a push to try and take what we have currently to get it to the state, and it seems almost every time I review it, which is probably about weekly, I'm kind of picking up on one extra little thing that's somewhat out of place or that I don't like.
Or formatting type.
Yeah, yes, sir. So we're if everyone likes the content and how it's presented and the kind of the meat and potatoes of it, for lack of a better, if that is great, we're not going to make any massive changes, but we're going to nitpick all those little formatting errors and make sure it's as clean as it possibly can.
Okay, and also note that under 4.3.6, the next one below that, 4.3.6.1 has the use or the, I guess the use struck, but then it's not a complete sentence anymore.
Yes, sir. I will take a peek at that probably tomorrow. So I apologize. Yeah, I see this stuff in my sleep at this point. So, but I will address that and make sure everything makes sense. Does anyone have any additional questions about the R2?
Just another suggestion, Dan, and that's oftentimes to help pick up those formatting things, it's good to have a clean version. So a strike-through version, and then with all the changes but no strike-throughs or anything, a clean version, because sometimes those really pop out really quickly when you look at that.
Okay, and I've been trying to get as many eyes on it as possible. So far we've, not only myself, the planning coordinator, I've had code enforcement review, I've had the county attorney review. I mean, we are all trying to make sure that we have a quality product coming out, but still missing things.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And then the final proposed zone consolidation is for the ag, farming, and ranching and the agricultural forestry zone districts. So ag, farming, and ranching is currently a 20-acre minimum. and the agricultural forestry is currently a 35 acre minimum. We would wind up allowing, let's see, all of the requirements of ag forestry, all of the requirements of the ag farming and ranching would now be the new requirements for the zone district. The bulk of ag forestry is 35 acre lots. Those are divisions of land that can be done outside of the department and just platted and recorded. So your average 35 acre lot with a 20 acre minimum, it's not going to increase density with the bulk of the lots in the ag forestry zone district. So while this allows additional uses and would allow somebody in an ag forestry lot to say maybe have a smaller setback or I think it's a 2% higher lot coverage, while it allows for some more intense maybe building or narrower setbacks, however you want to view that, for the bulk of our county, it doesn't increase density, and it doesn't take away any of the farming uses or any of those items. So as we kind of dive into this, let's see here. There we go. So this would turn into, like I just said, a 20 acre minimum, the lot width of 500, all of the setbacks, max building height, and percent of coverage, that's all currently the ag forestry zone district. What's allowed? Then let me see here. As I scroll down, you could see that the new name, the new description of the lot. In that beginning section, the ag farm and ranch hindquarters, you could see we took all of the requirements out of there. That will be in a separate chapter where it's supposed to be. We've added agritainment. We've added, I believe, animal units. The contractor's yard, number 1. So what we're trying to do is, right now there's some contractor's yards that are small enough to where they're an allowed use in some zone districts, and then the larger versions of contractor's yards are a special review use permit. So unless you read through contractor's yard to see the difference between the two, to see which one you are, so what we thought would be a little more clear would be as if we broke it down. We have a contractor's yard 1 and a contractor's yard 2. So if a contractor's yard 1 is there, that these are your requirements. If you're a 2, then it's one of those additional requirements. So we've tried to break things out to make it a little easier to understand. We have, let's see here. We brought down some of the uses from the agricultural forestry, the forestry, the fur-bearing animal farms, the commercial firewood cutting. Roadside stands somehow wasn't in here, but it was in some of the smaller agricultural zone districts. Typically in the larger lots, we have more agriculture, so there's more folks' individual wares to be sold. We've brought the sawmill down. That would be a new use for them. But in this one, besides allowing an increased density, we don't see it making things more dense or the population really kind of bursting. It's just kind of clarifying and making it a little easier for folks. And some of the folks in like the ag farming and ranching, they have the ability to maybe have a new use, have something that they wouldn't normally have an option to do. So that would be the R3 zone.
Just as a snippet, I didn't see it in there, but, the state requirement for wells would be 35 acres, so I don't know if it'd be worth notating somewhere in there if it's not.
Yeah, and I had emailed the Department of Water Resources regarding our zone consolidation and what we had on the horizon, and the folks had responded back to me that, providing it was a legal lot, it would meet the requirements in order for them to obtain water.
Right, the minimum lot requirements and all that.
Yeah, so I made sure to check to make sure we're not authorizing something that people are now dry.
Great.
So I've tried to reach out to every agency I thought would have input. But yeah, what is it? If you guys want me to put a notation in there about water use or anything
No,
like
I mean,
that.
if it's covered, it's covered.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is R3, correct?
Yes, sir. Did you pick up on the error we made?
Huh?
I noticed on one of the, after this was sent out, actually I noticed this afternoon, reviewing it, that on one of the handouts where we were striking through and bringing the zones over to kind of show you the work we did, we had it listed as the wrong zone district on the top.
Okay, okay, as long as you caught that, that had me a little confused.
Sorry about that, sir. I noticed that about an hour and 40 minutes ago.
Okay, as long as you got that. Do you guys have any other questions for Dan on any of the zone districts?
No, just, and maybe additional comment on what we're approving. I wonder if we could make the approval of, you know, we're all good with this, but kind of subject to change. You know, like if we see something in future presentations that changes definitions, that maybe warrants coming back and visiting one of these things, that we have the ability to do that.
I would absolutely love that. You know, my number one goal is trying to have the best product for the folks of this county as we possibly could do. So I have no concern over, you know, as many revisions as it takes to get it right. So in the future, if you guys see anything that you'd like different, I'm all ears.
Great. And so if we could just make sure that those stay in the laptops instead of taking them out until the whole project's done. Awesome, appreciate that.
Yep.
I'm still a little confused on how, if we should approve this now. Because clearly there's going to be changes between now and April 2024.
And there are, you know, the affordable housing audit, the attainable housing audit that's being done, they're anticipating having changes to our regulations. They're aware of these. So they have done an audit on what our current regulations are, and they have these exact proposed.
Okay.
To see what their recommendations would fit into current and proposed if approved. So they have they're working through it to make sure that if this isn't adopted, they can address the current, and if this is adopted, how they'll address what this would be. And the goal is to have a final adoption date for everything that gets approved, so it's all adopted on one date, so we have one clean document, essentially, without a pile of amendments on it. So the only way that we can come up with that is if there was an approval contingent on, or what is it, essentially like an activation date of sorts, or an adoption date that is, say, that April 2024 kind of date.
Okay.
And that way it would give the BOCC and the public time to hear it in public hearings and kind of move forward with it. What you guys have in front of you is what we're anticipating, unless there's something earth-shattering that we've all missed. This is pretty close to what we're hoping it's going to be, minus some minor housekeeping kind of, or amendments.
Yeah,
that are
minor
recommended.
amendment and changes, we just re-adopt it.
Yep.
I guess it's we're not locking in forever here.
No, we are most certainly
We're not
not.
getting married to it, right? Okay. Any other questions?
No, just if there are significant changes, however you want to define that, you know, to something we've already approved, just if it could be listed under old business or something like that, you know. if there's
Absolutely.
any more than, you know, just typos or something like
Yeah,
that. you know.
if we're looking at any sort of different uses, new uses, that is all stuff that I would absolutely present back in front of you.
Cool.
And I would say if you send us a clean version, I have done a lot of technical editing. I can help you with the formatting type stuff, so
Okay.
make sure you include clean versions for us
Okay.
to go over too, because sometimes then it jumps right out.
Okay, absolutely.
So once again, we are approving all 3 zone districts with one motion, as it is one item on the, under new business. We are approving this with the tentative adoption date of, or with the adoption date of April 2024. So if everybody's okay with that, I am open to a motion.
I make a motion that we approve changes presented today, subject to further revisions down the road with the final approval of April 2024. Good enough?
Works for me. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed reg changes A, B, and C. All in favor? Gardner?
Aye.
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 Motion has been approved. And without any further business, unless anybody has anything to add, we will,
I guess just to update, I was talking with John a couple weeks ago about possibly setting up some training for you guys. Just refresher class, I had talked with the county attorney, and it looks like we're all on board for August 15th at 3 p.m. in room 207, which is across from the fishbowl upstairs. So it's a basic planning class taught by the county attorney. So,
okay, thank you.
30 pages. Did he say that was? 30 pages.
should be a thriller.
And with that, we're going to adjourn the meeting at 3:47.